Thank you, Lucretia. And our music program, huh? Yeah. Thank you. You know, some of you who've been around for a little while know that I like to predict other people's predictions. They're not mine. But I buy some of them. I believe in some of them. But I want to share with you a few predictions from the past, okay? The first one is from Dr. Lee DeForest, who is the inventor of the TV. And he said, man will never reach the moon, regardless of all future scientific advances. Okay. There is no likelihood man can ever tap the power of the atom. Robert Millikan, Nobel Prize in Physics, 1923. I think there is a world market for maybe 5 computers. Thomas Watson, chairman of IBM, 1943. Bill Gates said $640K ought to be enough for everybody. Oh, at Yale, professor gave a young student a C. He said, you did a good job of writing paper, but there's no feasibility in what you recommended. The paper was proposing a reliable overnight delivery service. It was written by Fred Smith, who went on to found Federal Express. One guy said to another fellow, drill for oil? You mean drill into the ground to try and find oil? You're crazy. Well, here's the last one, okay? Stocks have reached what looks like a permanently high plateau. Irving Fisher, professor of economics, Yale University, 1929. So, there are a few quotes I want to share with you this morning. One is, lives are changed when people connect. Life is changed when everything is connected. That is Qualcomm, which is a technology firm that is fine as a foundation and brings a lot of other technology firms together to share information. So life is changed when everything is connected. I've been reading a book by Thomas Friedman, which is kind of a lengthy read, and he is a New York Times reporter. Some of you may know, read his column. But anyway, in his book, he talks about Intel and the microchip and the development of it. And the fellow who really developed that was a fellow by the name of Moore, and there's a Moore's Law that came about because of that. And the Moore's Law says that microchip capacity will double every 2 years. And he predicted that, and he said 10 years the first time he was interviewed in 1967. What's happened is microchip capacity has doubled every 2 years for the last 50 years. Now, what does that mean? The first Intel chip, called 4004, is now today called the Intel 7th generation core processor. Most of you know what those are. You may not know, but you see them, and you might not be able to define it. But what they know is that today, that core processor is 3,500 times more or faster than the first Intel chip. The second thing is that 90,000 times more efficient than the original Intel chip, and that it is 60,000 times lower in cost than the original Intel chip. Matter of fact, one person said, with IBM, said, we never can manufacture them because they cost too much. Moore changed that with a new design. What the folks did at Intel is tried to say, so people can understand it, what does that relate to? And so what they did is they took a VW Beetle that was built in 1967, and they said if it had doubled at capacity and efficiency over the last 50 years, it would run at 300 miles per hour, 300,000 miles per hour. It would use gas at the rate of 2 million miles per gallon, and it would cost 4 cents. So our car manufacturers haven't quite kept up with that pace, okay, to say the least. And then there's some quotes about change. Some of them I like and I was really attached to, and then I read an article that said they weren't true. The first one is Henry David Thoreau. Go confidently in the direction of your dreams. Live the life you've imagined. You know that? He didn't say it. I'm sorry. He said something like it, okay? He said something a little different. He said that what I learned at Walden Pond is this, at least by my experiment, that if one advances confidently into the direction of his dreams and endeavors to live the life which he has imagined, he will meet with a success unexpected in common hours. That's the real quote. And isn't it richer? Think about it. But the other one's kind of cute, and and the reason they recognized is that Thoreau didn't use exclamation marks in anything. And these were all exclamation marks. So anyway, another one. Be the change you want to see in the world. Who said that? No, he didn't. That is a shortcut of what he said. Here's what he really said. This is the closest thing anybody could find. Is that if we could change ourselves, the tendencies in the world would also change. As a man changes his own nature, so does the attitude of the world change towards him. We need not wait to see what others do, but we need to do it ourselves. Now, that's a nice quote. We all like it. But this is much richer in what he was saying. Because what he was really saying through this is we can't do it alone. If you take that quote, it sounds like you can do it alone. That just means somebody starts it. But it takes resources and people to change the world. We're not doing it alone in any way, shape, or form. And so as I thought about this, I said, what are the changes that might be appropriate at Unity of Richmond? And when we talk about change, we're just talking about adding more or maybe changing the way we do things, because there's nothing wrong with Unity of Richmond. Let me say that first. So this is not a critique. The first thing I would say that each and every person should consider is becoming an owner of Unity of Richmond. Taking ownership. And what does that mean? It means that I buy into the mission. It means that I buy into what's happening at Unity of Richmond. It means that I'm willing to speak up if I don't like what's happening at Unity of Richmond. And when you do that, please come to me. Don't do it out there in the parking lot. That's really important, because then we can do something about it. Or if it's another person who's doing something you like, go talk to them. Don't tell me about it. Okay? It's none of my business, so to speak. And so we take ownership. When we take ownership, we become more involved at a richer level. When we take ownership, we really want to make a difference. When we take ownership, we begin to see the potential in Unity of Richmond. And so taking ownership is important. One of the things I really am proud about as your minister is that when we have a project here, we can have as many as 70% of our people show up as volunteers. Sometimes 80. By the time you look at the whole year, 80% of our people volunteer here. Do something in the community or here at Unity of Richmond. That's huge, because the old line thinking is that, 20% of people do all the work. That's not true. And so we're really blessed that way. But the other thing that can be challenging sometimes is that for each of us, an ownership takes ownership of a project and sees it through to the end. That's a little different. Takes a little more commitment. But when we feel like we're owners, we're willing to do it. The second thing is to understand that we are part of a bigger movement that makes us possible. In 1952, Unity of Richmond was started, and in a few years, a minister from Fairfax came to Unity of Richmond, and she was the first minister. Her name was Siglerman, I think. Then there was a second minister who came from Fairfax. So Unity of Fairfax started us, but Unity of Fairfax was started by Unity Movement out of Kansas City. And so we're part of a bigger whole. And when we start to understand that, we can start to see our mission in a larger way. We can start to understand that what we do here becomes important to that overall picture. and that we're moving forward in a bigger way because we have more people who are saying, yes, I take ownership of the unity movement overall. I take ownership of the fact that we can change the world. And I believe that. And I want to start it here in this community. So see yourselves as a part of a bigger movement that you make possible. Now the third one. We must be a mission-oriented church. There are two kinds of churches. There's a minister-centric and there is the mission-centric. Now, I figure I got another 20 or 30 years left in me. Right? Vicki said, I'm not so sure of that. But anyway, she sees me when I snooze. But anyway, what I'm trying to say, whether it's 2 years or 5 years or 10 years or whatever it is not really important. The fact is someday I will leave this ministry because I'm supposed to. Because you may need another person at another time. Because Spirit says, get out of here. Whenever that is. I'm not ready today, by the way. Okay? Just want you to know that. However, the difference between, it really shows up, a mission-centric ministry and a minister-centric ministry, and it used to be mostly minister-centric through the years. This is a change. This is a change we have to make. Is that we end up, when I leave or somebody like me leaves, they have a 50% change in attendance. That's because they're not thinking about the mission, they're thinking about the minister. That's not what I want you to do. I want you to think about the mission because it's important. Every life that is transformed is important. Everything you do when you show up in the community because you understand the power of love, you understand the power of giving of yourself, your time, you understand how it can help people. And so you want people to be transformed in a positive and loving manner. Not saved. They're already saved. People are already saved. But what they can do is be transformed so that they can understand that they are the spiritual being that they are and make a difference spiritually in the world. That's why generations are beginning to become more spiritually oriented than religious oriented. And that's the mission, is to have people understand that they're spiritual beings, and they understand, no matter what words they put it in, as they understand that, they can come together in harmony. They can come together in peace. They can come together in joy. They can come together in love. And if it can happen here, it can happen out there. If it happens out there, it can happen in the world. I think Richmond is a big key to that. And part of it is because, and this is Black History Month, because of the fact that we have so much work to do, and it's being done little by little, but not quite fast enough, I don't think, in our relationships with African Americans or blacks and whites. We still need to work on that. If by 2030 we haven't solved that, we're still in trouble because we're not all together. And it spreads out into other areas. I personally happen to think that this past election showed up some of those things that we thought were maybe not a big deal. And yet they are. And so we've got more work to do. That's being mission-oriented. That's caring about one another. That's saying we can live together in harmony. And so we follow that mission. And so the other thing we need to do, I believe, and we do a great job of it, but we can do more, is be more involved in our community in different ways. We are becoming a church. We are working on that. We continue working on becoming a church without walls. And as we become a church without walls, we make a difference in the community. We have some people in our congregation who make a big difference in the community. Many of you know who they are. Lynn Johnson, for example. Huge what she does in this community. Rob Jones, how he reaches out to bring people together. Dawn and Joe, who are all over the place making a change in this community. Tom Hartman, who works with the education system and is very interested in that, does work there. And each and every one of you I know has something, and I don't get them all. But I want you to know that we are doing it together. Who's he? No. There's a lot of people I could name. But just know that we're making a difference together, sometimes one person at a time in a given situation. Sometimes it's a whole group of us coming together and make a difference. And we can do that together also. But what we have to do is continue to be more involved, because the change is going to take place here for us. It might change in India. It might change in Kansas City. It might change in California. It always changes in California. But the point is that no matter what, it's here that makes the difference in our lives. It's here we feel the mission. It's here we say yes. It's here that we step into who we are and what we can become. Because God, Spirit, has ideas and concepts for you that you don't even know about. And for me too. But as we move forward, as we step out into community, as we really become this church without walls, you are going to grow spiritually more than you ever have in your lives. You grow a lot sometimes when you come to these new concepts. But when you reach out to others, when you move forward, when you take some risk, you grow even more. And that's when you really, really, really get to that last and fifth principle of unity: take action over what you believe. And you will. And then there's a fifth change I want to talk about. And this might be the first time you kind of heard it this way. But it's about giving. And I'm talking about money now, okay? For a long time, and there's nothing wrong with it, but it's been the way it's been done, is we've kind of taught giving from the standpoint, if you give, you shall return. You'll get a return, okay? And some people get into prosperity classes because they want a return, and they want it pretty quickly. And when they don't get exactly that, they get disillusioned and feel like this doesn't work. I had somebody in class for 3 weeks and quit because her income didn't double, which is what she asked for. It's a true story, true. Wasn't here, somewhere else. But anyway, so, it's interesting that we give that philosophy. And if we're not careful, we get into teaching lack consciousness when we think we are teaching prosperity consciousness. You know what I mean? So think of it this way. Suppose you give because of the mission and not because of anything you have any interest in. Like you do with the Red Cross. Like you do with other organizations. You give from your heart because you believe in the mission and you want that to work. There is a church in the Unity Movement that is, they say, 2 years from completion of their goal. But they're already doing one of the things they want to do. One of the things they did is they took our idea of consistent giving. Called me up and said, Richard, tell me about that. And so I sent them the information. That was about 6 years ago. They took it on, and what they decided, and a goal they came up with a few years ago, was that what they wanted to do is have the people who were mission-oriented sign up for consistent giving. Whether it's $10, $50, $100, $1,000, doesn't make any difference, sign up for it. So the money comes in during the week. That's for the operating income. The Sunday love offerings are given to the community. Take that in. The Sunday love offerings. We might be talking about $60,000 or $70,000 a year would go out into our community. Would that make an impact? It would. And it would be because we are stepping into the mission of who we are rather than giving out a need or what we perceive as need. Now, I'm not against tithing. I'm not saying I don't tithe because it makes me feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. But I really am tithing for the mission. That's what I've learned to do. And so I have no expectations of the return. And yet my life is truly blessed in many, many ways. And so we see giving a little differently, and it transforms our lives, and it transforms this ministry. And then the sixth thing is we move forward in the future through back casting. You see, if I jump out to 2030, that's my favorite year right now, and I jump out to 2030 and I stay there, I'm just dreaming. not getting anywhere. I'm just saying, hey, when we get there, I'll be ready. I won't be surprised. And yet, the truth is, I won't be ready. And I might be a little surprised. So what do we have to do? How do we do things differently when it comes to our planning? My brother-in-law, John Upton, who is executive director of Virginia Baptist Assembly and was the president of the General Alliance of Baptists throughout the world. That's 100 million Baptists. He traveled for 5 years, 165 countries. And I watched his growth during that time, and we are good friends, thank goodness. And one of the things John shared with me a while back was that, it wasn't long ago, he was invited to go hear an NASA scientist who gave a talk on how he got to Mars ahead of the schedule that they presently had. What had happened when they came to him, they said, well, here's what we'd like you. We want you to get us to Mars in 30 days. And he said, oh. And they said, oh, by the way, right now, the best we can see is 18 months. But we want you to do it in 30 days. This is a very smart man. Because what he did is he looked at being on Mars, and then he backcast to 30 days, and he knew that they didn't have what was necessary. They had not invented what was necessary to get there in 30 days. That something would have to change. You couldn't use the old system. And folks, that's what we're going through. We're not going to be able to use what used to be that was successful. We're going to have to reinvent things so we can step into this future and become part of a mission that's greater than we are. And so they did it, and what they called it, the guy said, what I did is I just backcast to 30 days. Well, he was a failure. He only got there in 60 days. It's good to miss a target like that, isn't it? So, anyway, that's the sick thing. We really need to take and learn here, I'm going to talk about it more at the annual meeting, how we move into the future by backcasting and figuring out as a ministry what we have to do in order to be ready to take advantage of the changes that are taking place between now and 2030. Because church will not be done as it's done today. Oh, we're going to have Sunday morning services, there's no doubt about that. But it won't be the bulk and the main menu of what we're doing. Especially as we reach out in the community, especially as we engage people, especially as we say, come on. One of the things I love this morning, so many of the millennials I think are sitting here, are close to. Okay? Because what I know is 15 years from now, 10 years from now, that 73% of the workforce will be millennials. They're the people who are going to support all the things that are going on in this world. And if we don't have a mission that's attractive, if we don't have change that's attractive, we're going to be with us traditionalists who live to be 120 and who think like they're 120 if we're not careful. And so we have to move again, and we have to learn to backcast. And again, I'll talk about that a little more in detail about how we do that. So as we do that, what I want you to remember is that you have the power to do all the things I'm talking about. I don't have the power to make you do it, and I wouldn't if I could. But you have the power. It's in your hands. And so, as we do that, as we take those 6 things and we begin to lead to the change that's necessary, then that's when you will be the change itself. Thank you.